Yeah. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? I don't want to turn this into a quarterly show, but it's been a while. It's, been nice to have a break and just enjoy the laid back. I mean, I honestly, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I've gone behind on stuff because there's so much going on just with the summer activities, especially
Hmm.
in northern Minnesota where I am. You're in Georgia, Bridget, so I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's still probably well, you're probably in vacation mode a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're about to go, kids are about to go back to school in a few weeks. So everyone's like packing it in. All
Yeah.
my family's birthday for some reason is in June and July. So,
Okay.
it's always pretty chaotic around the end of the summer.
School that I mean, it is a different scenario here because summer is shorter here, but the school typically doesn't start until September. When does it start for you guys?
My kids go back August 5th,
Okay.
which I've heard that, and I don't know if this is actually it. I've never looked into it, but I've actually heard because it gets so hot here, they kind of modified how when we go back to school. So kids are going back when it's a bit warmer. So they're actually like inside more when it's really hot. Because I mean, it's not going to cool down here until maybe October, maybe November. Like, yeah, it's going to be pretty summertime basically until probably the beginning of October, if I had to guess.
That makes sense. It's a good theory. Get kids out of the extreme heat and into the air conditioning during some
Oh,
of the
yeah.
hottest months. Yeah, get up there into some of the hottest summer, even into September sometimes. So, uh,
Yeah. And I felt like we had like a pretty mild summer. And then it hit like the summer solstice in like mid June. And then it immediately was like 100. So it was like, 80s, 100. And I was like, all right, I spoke too soon. I jinxed us all. I'm sorry, everyone in Georgia.
oh well. Land of the midnight sun up here. It's 84 degrees currently. People tune in for the weather talk. No.
I know.
I
This is what they're here for.
I mean it was uh it would have been kind of fun to have Jody. She's been off doing all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Have her on the show for the Minnesota connection because she's uh honorary Georgian now, but originally from my neck of the woods,
And
northern.
she's acclimated. Acclimated now. She's one of us.
Um, and this is the Thodcast, conversations about animation. Just getting back to our animation roots a little bit here on today's episode. And of course, a much needed look into the latest from Pixar Animation Studios in Emeryville, California, the Bay Area. This film set in the Bay Area, released by Disney, Disney, Pixar, family, and big deal, this movie. So we'll get into it, but I just, we'll keep it fairly light and simple, I think, today. You and Bridget and I'm your host, Philip Elke. And thank you so much for joining on the Thodcast. Conversations about animation and also all kinds of movies and pop culture. Um, and we were able to schedule. I'm getting back into the swing of things myself after dealing with a difficult start to 2024. Things are turning around finally here in July. Okay, well, Bridget, we were talking about summer, and this movie takes place during a summer camp, an indoor. It's set in San Francisco, the Bay Area high school, where they are at a hockey camp and all that jazz. Where does Inside Out 2 pick up within the context of the Inside Out universe, as well as for you personally, I guess?
Well, it's so funny. So like of course we've talked about Inside Out, the first one. And I feel like the older I get, like the different things, like it changes how I relate to the movies. So like this one I felt was like a very current time frame, my daughter's turning 11 this month, and she's very much like she's right on the edge. It's like that preteen teenager phase where it's like, ah, her and her friends are going to different schools. They're not going to be in the same schools for sixth grade, and the anxiety of like going to a new school. Am I going to have friends? And it was like it was so funny because I was watching this, and there were so many times that my daughter like looked at me and she was like, "Oh my gosh." And there were so many times that she was like, "Oh, it's so cringe." And I was like, "That's the point." Because like I remember being that age and being completely cringe. I couldn't imagine like seeing my having to watch myself like on film or something now at that age. So I was like, I mean, it definitely like hit home for me. And of course, anxiety, which I have. And I've literally watched my own daughter have just like going to see her new middle school for the first time. She was so anxious, chewing her fingernails. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like it's all happening in real time. So it was like, it was really crazy to kind of like see the comparisons in my own life with my own kid, who is also going through the same things Riley kind of was, even though they're a little bit different in age.
Well, the the last film teased the alarm signal, that red
Yeah.
puberty. So we finally get to see that triggered here. That's kind of the inciting incident. And well, okay, this film um, is in a similar vein to another recent movie from Pixar, Turning Red, of course.
Yeah, turning red.
Was this the same director? I need to
Uh Kelsey Mann was the director, and this was his feature directorial debut. So I don't
okay,
believe so.
okay. I had no idea who Kelsey Mann was, but this is a feature animation debut. Okay, so who did Turning Red? But anyways, it's a similar story about teenage girls and awkwardness and
Yeah, coming of age films.
uh, very I don't know. I think very relatable for people, clearly, with box office results that we're seeing. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah, it
it's
did crazy good. And the director for Turning Red was it might be Do May or Do Mi. She
okay.
was the director for Turning Red.
That's right. Yeah, this over a decade in the making, or nearly a decade. That was
Mhm.
2015, the original Inside Out. So I think we've all been anticipating seeing the continuation of Riley's story, and this one picks up not long after the first one. Um, and we got one short film, Riley's First Date, set
Mhm.
in these two. But yeah, these films don't take a short amount of time to make, and there was never a guarantee that we'd even be getting a second Inside Out. And some people might view the decision to make a sequel to Inside Out maybe a bit um, of a cash grab, like a bit of a cynical move to, or a purely commercially motivated type of thing. But Pixar has made plenty of great sequels. So if anyone was gonna do Inside Out 2 correctly, it would be Pixar. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
yeah, considered in the past.
Well,
Yeah.
well, that's my thing. It's like I'm fine. Like the sequels, like all the sequels and prequels and reboots and all those things are fine if they're done well.
Mhm.
And that's what like so many of these like studios and stuff are not doing. They just like, oh, this is what they want. This is why we have 500 Gru and Minion movies. And I'm like, these are nothing new. I'm not invested in this anymore. But like Inside Out 2, it was like it felt like a continuation of the first one, not just something new with a bunch of hard jokes.
Yeah. Have you seen the latest Despicable Me?
I have not. Where they have the baby, I have not. I don't know that I've seen the last. I don't think I saw Rise of Gru either.
Okay. Well, yeah,
I don't
just
think I saw
out.
that one either.
Yeah, out now is the fourth in the main line Despicable Me series. Of course, there have been a couple of Minions spin-offs now, so I can't keep them all straight. I haven't
I
seen.
think there's like three,
Yeah.
three maybe three or four. I don't know. That my kids aren't really into Minions anymore. My daughter was for a little bit, but I think she's kind of aged out of it. Doesn't really hit with her anymore.
only seen um, the first Despicable Me. I'm not gonna badmouth those films, but it's just not something that I'm not um a completionist when it comes to seeing all the major animated films. Despite the name of this podcast, I mean, we only do it very casually and occasionally put out an episode. So I don't know. It's not. I'm more just a general cinephile, and I'm not going to force myself to go out and see everything. So there'll be reasons for which I will definitely check out certain movies, like if a podcast I follow, like a movie review podcast or something, um, is going to go in depth on a film, then I'll make sure to see it, just so I have the context, for being able to really process the analysis of it, because I enjoy, listening to discussions on film analysis and kind of the development of these projects. But um, it's I'll make the call at some point whether I want to make a more affirmative effort to go out and see everything, because I can usually find something to appreciate in even some of the trashier stuff. I'm sure, yeah, if I were to do a complete watch through of the Despicable Me franchise, which I know I probably will at some point, especially if I have kids, but that remains to be seen, when that will ever occur. Uh,
Yeah.
the
Well, it's really if your
film
kids
on,
are into it
yeah,
too. Because like there's like some movies that I have watched because my kids didn't really care to watch them. So I'm like, okay, I'll watch them by myself. Like, I don't care. I mean, the first Inside Out, Scarlett was only 2. So I watched the first Inside Out by myself. And I boo-hooed when Bing Bong died. And then when I got older, I boo-hooed for different reasons. So there we go. We're all evolving, all changing
oh
all
yeah.
the time.
Good. Yeah, this movie pokes at the emotions. Pixar pride themselves in their emotional and thematic substance in their films. So, we were all hoping that we'd be in for a bit of a treat going into this, and it's gotten very positive reception so far. So you would say you enjoyed the did do you have any strong feelings as to whether you think you like this one better than the first one, or it's hard to
Uh,
say?
I feel like it's hard to say because I really enjoy both of them. And I do think that it really just feels like a continuation of the first one. I feel like they did a good job of that. Like this is the same person, although she is changing because she's getting older, as we all do. And I thought like I did think when I first heard that they were making a sequel and I saw all of these different characters that they were thinking of or that they might possibly have, I was like, well, I hope they do it in a way that like I don't know, makes sense.
Mhm.
Because it's like, okay, well, none of the other characters, like, you know, how at the end of the first one, you see all these different characters with also the emotions. And I'm
Mhm.
like, so how are they? I was kind of curious, like, how are they going to explain that and other people? And like, or is it going to get too convoluted if they try to fit in too many? So I thought they did a really good job with that. But yeah, I don't know. It hit, I feel like in the same way that the first one did, I guess like emotionally and just kind of like heartwarming wise but just like differently, I guess. Cause like, you know, most of us have anxiety. And I feel like once I became a parent, it has become even worse when it's not just you that you have to like keep alive. And so I'm like, wow, I did not realize that I would relate so much with this 13-year-old's emotions about anxiety. So yeah, I don't know. It like hit different, but like I like both of them, I feel like equally, just for different reasons.
Yeah, this certainly hits on a key point in our development as humans, and from kids into adults. And it's definitely a rich and rife moment in in a child's life when they start experiencing these, pubescent uh, occurrences, these sudden shifts in their personality and their body chemistry. And yeah, this movie,
Yeah.
it takes you inside the at least the brain space of that whole process. Yeah, I don't know. With there's the fun thing about Inside Out is it's very abstract, and you can kind of interpret it in many different ways. The development of this franchise, the original Inside Out, I guess it draws a lot of inspiration from it was a TV show, Herman's Head.
Hmm.
It's just like a character you're seeing kind of in emotions interact. Pixar, the Pixar formulas, just anthropomorphic versions of all kinds of different inanimate objects or concepts. And, we've had toys, cars, bugs. Um, what else
Souls.
am I missing? Souls, yeah, robots, and here it's emotions themselves that reside within just an imagined world. Um, they call I guess headquarters is the command station, right? In
Hmm.
inside do they have a term for the overall space in which this takes place? The big,
I feel like they just call it like the mind,
yeah,
if I remember correctly. Like
yeah.
it's just Riley's mind, and then all the her mind has all the different subsections.
hmm The big overworld, that's the mind, and then there are the floating islands that determine her core personality. So yeah, it's just very imaginative and certainly not at all definitive or all encompassing as to what the mind truly is in reality, but just kind of within this fun cartoon context, it's a great opportunity to explore some of these ideas. So we got the core emotions of joy, sadness, disgust, fear, anger. But they had considered many, many more than these core five for the original film. And so they're exploring that a little more here. And they, kind of retcon a little bit, but it's easily forgiven because, it's so abstract. There's so many ways you can go about it. Did that sit well with you? The decision to add more emotions?
Well, yeah, I think it made sense. And that's why I said I was like a little worried that they would try to like shoehorn in too many emotions and it would just get too messy. So I thought that like picking like and apparently they did it intentionally, like when they finally decided what they wanted was to pick the self-conscious ones, the ones that deal with like you being self-conscious and like caring what other people think. Because when you're a teenager or like a preteen, that becomes very important at that age. It's like, oh, how do people perceive me? Do people like me? Do I have friends? And so it was like they wanted to find the ones that kind of like fit with that age group. And that's why, like, because, before she was Riley, who was like, running around with underwear on her head and throwing broccoli all over the place. But like now it's like, oh, someone said the group that I like sucks. So now I'm like, oh, yeah, they totally suck. Just kidding. I don't like anything like that. And that's why I said, like, it's so funny because, like, I'm watching my daughter go through it and she'll literally, like, something that she used to find funny, I'll say now, and she'll be like, Mom, that's so cringe. And I'm like, excuse me. Like, we're cool. I don't know what you're talking about. Your parents are cool. Um, and so, yeah, I feel like adding just a little bit at a time and then kind of like they did a little plug with the mom where they were like, oh, hey, anxiety. And they're like, oh, hey. Like, they're just hanging out in the back. And so I was like, because I'm like, of course, if the parents kind of evolve past needing these self-conscious emotions to be like present all the time, I do feel like having anxiety show up makes sense, especially for the mother. As a mother, because I am constantly anxious. I'm like, stay away from the edge of the pool. Make sure you're looking both ways in a parking lot. Please hold my hand so we don't get ran over. Because kids don't care. they don't have any sense of self-preservation. They're just all over the place all the time. So
Yeah.
like I felt.
Well, it's yeah. No wonder it's riveting. I mean, I should probably just get out of the way the elephant in the room, which is that this in a period where it seems like general movie theater box office is suffering. This is now Pixar's most successful film financially globally, and it's over 500 million domestic. Yeah, I'm looking at this. It's about $550 million domestic, and then globally over 1250. Yeah, or $1 billion, 250,000 or 250 million. So it's
Yeah. It's done very well.
people are loving their Inside Out too. I mean, it's a big, it's the summer blockbuster season, so families are looking for stuff to do. But
Especially out of the heat.
yeah, but it's it. I think part of it too is people resonating with these ideas of these more complex emotions that you begin to feel in your teenage years and adulthood now too, and a lot of these kind of are associated with some of the more dysfunctional elements that we see within modern society, especially with all the trappings of technology and overstimulation, medication, caffeine. I've had caffeine today, and it's just it's a way in which like we try to regulate our interior life, um, and I don't know. It's kind of funny, like the color schemes of these new emotion characters too. It's kind of like the marker or crayon sets you would get as a kid. I think specifically with like Crayola markers, they would have their
Mhm.
set of classic colors, and then if you're fancy, you would get also the bold colors, like
Yeah.
the expansion pack with some of the less
You're getting
traditional
like
color. Yeah,
teal and like a dark purple and
those were
which
all.
and I
Yeah.
yeah, well I like that when I didn't even think about the colors really, but like embarrassment being pink, I was like that makes so much sense.
Well, and those colors were always my favorite because they were, less boring. They were uh,
Vibrant.
more exotic at least.
Yes. I
uh,
don't know, I always tend to go when like they have the pin sets and it's like oh blue, red, black, and I'm like, ugh, and it's like, oh, and you can also get purple and pink, and I'm like, teal, yes, let me have those. I want the pretty colors.
exactly. You know, it's tempting to take pride in, these kind of more, I don't know, niche kinds of feelings and expressions. That anxiety, who is the primary new character in this film, an antagonistic character ultimately, in the way that she takes over, voiced brilliantly by Maya Hawke of gosh, Stranger Things.
Stranger Things.
She was recently in something else. I don't know.
I don't know that I've seen her in anything else, but obviously Robin, Stranger Things,
Yeah, uh,
Chef's Kiss.
yeah. Um, the I don't know, the way she just takes over, and it can seem um positive, the degree of influence that she has, because the she's just brimming with energy constantly. She was in Maestro. Asteroid City. That was
Mm.
one of the things that she had a big part in. Um, and then yeah, I think anxiety is kind of I don't know, one of the primary issues facing people's overall psychology in the modern era. Myself too, like I definitely catch myself just like almost slipping into OCD tendencies sometimes with just how obsessive I get about it's just certain nagging thoughts about just kind of some of the most inconsequential things just out of habit.
Oh
But
yeah.
you as a mom, I mean, have more reason uh, to have these kinds of impulses. But for me, it was more just out of I don't know, either boredom or just ritual. I
Well,
don't
and
know.
sometimes this can also be like a self-regulation thing. So for a long time, like I have ADHD, and for a long time I wasn't medicated. And I remember when I went to try and get medication once, and they were like, "Oh," my doctor was like, "Oh, you're just anxious. You're so fidgety. You talk so fast." And then I went to like a psychologist, and she was like, "No, you just have untreated ADHD, which makes your brain anxious. If we treat it, then your brain will work better, which will make you less anxious." And I was like, I never connected those dots. Granted, I still got anxiety, don't worry. But it's much better the days that I like take my medication because my brain can like, I don't know, put together coherent little brain cells to make things happen. And so I was like, I really feel like a lot of times it almost becomes like a coping mechanism. And honestly, that's why I liked that they didn't make her like a bad guy. I say her, but I guess because her voice actress a girl, but I was like, I'm like, I guess she's a her. I don't know. She's a whatever she wants. But like apparently they like when they started off, she was like an antagonist, like bad guy, not good, bad. But I think making her kind of like, ambivalent, I guess. No, maybe that's not the word. But just kind of like, making her ambiguous. I don't know what word I'm looking for. But yeah, just kind of like making her like not good necessarily, but also not bad, it like I don't know, because like having anxiety is a normal thing. Obviously, we have it for like some kind of self-preservation, even if at times it makes us completely irrational. And so I was like, I liked that they did it like that because I'm like, anxiety is not necessarily bad. We have it for a reason. However, sometimes it can spiral a bit out of control, and we have to kind of like rein that in. So I liked how they presented her, and she wasn't just like the villain of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, the way to, I guess, best combat anxiety is you not to resist it. It's kind of an interesting approach that is recommended by people who effectively qualified to treat these kinds of things. And yeah, if you try to like repress it or resist it, then that only causes things to become worse. And here, the solution ultimately is to just kind of placate anxiety and provide her with as much kind of comfort she needs as she needs within that headquarters space.
Yeah.
And
Getting her to let it go, basically. We're taking a note from Elsa. Just gotta let it go.
yeah,
Gotta
yeah,
let it breathe. Can't let it run. Can't let it run you. Or then you're gonna be like stuck in a holding pattern.
yeah, you get those kind of hallmarks of Disney and Pixar animated films where, yeah, it is a lot of like self-reflection and introspection. Um, some of these kind of Zen concepts that get brought up to, I guess, help people, and kids and people being raised up within, this busy world, to have a better handle on things, and ultimately be more compassionate, be more, um, you know, for socially, um, proactive and positive towards, you know, broadly our fellow human beings, but also just the world itself, nature and our relationship to life on this planet. It sounds awfully generic and overly Pollyannish maybe, but it's just they do some interesting things with these films and develop compelling characters with great vocal performances, and of course the visuals. It's kind of why we come out to these things. It's incredible the amount of work that goes into all of these um, imaginative worlds and characters, and then hopefully take home something of a feel good message from it all. Even though that message isn't necessarily the primary um, impetus for these things. They're not trying
Yeah.
to preach at us necessarily.
Well, and that's like, well, you're like at your the kind of like the point you're talking about. I don't think it's Pollyannish. I think it's good. But like, I do think that I guess kind of personifying these feelings. There's actually plenty of like, there's a couple of different book series I've seen directed towards kids and preteens where it's like they kind of embody emotions kind of in the same way. And it kind of like tells them, like, oh, how to, like, if this is what you're feeling, this is what this is. This is how we can handle it. But it does it in a way that, like, obviously it makes more sense for kids and preteens. And so I think stuff like this, why it does resonate with so many people, because it does, like, maybe you didn't realize that what you had was anxiety. Maybe you didn't realize what that like daunting feeling in the back of your head was, that's what that was. And so I do think that it can be useful, especially when, they don't really know how to voice things. They're like, I don't know why I feel like that. It's just how I feel. And I'm like, you got to give me more descriptors. I don't know what that means. What do you mean? And so I think like stuff like that can really help. And like, I mean, even my daughter, she's been like, oh, you remember how like ennui was in that one scene? That's how I feel half the time. And I'm like, oh no. And the end scene when they were like, oh, how was hockey? And they were like, oh, we can't tell anything. We can't tell her anything. We did so many bad things. And she's like, don't worry, I got it. And she's like, it was good. I have that happened. I like stared at my daughter and she was like, no, no. She was like, I do that all the time. Because I'll be like, oh, it's first day of school. What'd you do? Did you make friends? And she's like, no, it's fine. Oh, okay. Anything exciting? No, it was fine. Okay. I guess that's it. So I'm like, I do think that like these movies, especially the Pixar ones, are like really good at like giving kids kind of like a place to jump off of when they need, I guess, ideas of how they feel or like how to explain it.
Absolutely. Yeah, this will be very formative for young kids, I imagine, just becoming introduced to these concepts. And yeah, it's like there are lots of dysfunctional, toxic ways in which we deal with these things. And I mean, just knowing the kinds of more healthy responses that these movies, these kinds of movies teach, it isn't going to solve everything either. There's always going to be the temptation for abuse, overreaction, illness within the human psyche and the human mind, soul. So, it really is more about putting these things into practice than just, learning and absorbing. Um, but yeah, it's good to see kind of a model um, played out for us when so often a lot of people have just been kind of, I mean, throughout prior generations, especially, there just hasn't been much of a template for a lot of people. And so that's why you do see people struggle. Nowadays, where we have access to so much information that it's good to have resources you know, like Pixar films that provide a source of inspiration to kind of cut through all the noise of our life. Back in earlier eras when the approach to mental health wasn't taken as seriously, there just wasn't as much going on either, I think, to
We had less to do,
for
less to
people.
see.
Yeah, people would, maybe have a bit of a dalliance with drugs or something, but often once adult responsibilities would hit, that would kind of fade in the background. But it's a much different world now, and everything, we kind of have immediate access to everything under the sun. So it's good when we can kind of sit back and just absorb some, frankly, just some good art, which
Yeah.
yeah, it is something that people they don't always have great access to, and Pixar films have always been prided in their ability to retain a strong degree of artistry as corporate entertainment. Um, well,
Yeah.
well, and then
Goodness.
we have other. I don't know. We're not going heavily into the plot here necessarily, but I guess once that alarm for puberty goes off, there are all kinds of other anthropomorphized denizens of the mind that perform various functions. I would have a theory that like the kind of more complex emotions sort of manifest from a similar place that these little bean characters come from, and once they become complex enough, then they become like fully fledged emotions, kind of like Pokemon or some Digimon or something. They just
They evolve.
evolving from whatever seedlings you know germinated at one point deep inside the mind. And then all kinds of different, fun little abstract structures that represent different psychological concepts and even some spiritual concepts too.
Wait, did you notice that the walls that hold the memories in the brain, when they go and stand on top of them, it looks like the grooves of the brain?
Oh yeah, yeah, that
I
makes
was like, we were watching that and I was like, I was like, I see what we're doing here. I see that. I see you.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of just deep, picks. I know I could watch this movie probably every day for the rest of my life and still pick out new details. It's just there's so much that they can cram into every single frame.
I know, like the sarcasm. I liked the sarcasm. And then I like that when you talk over the sarcasm, it distorts everything you're saying. It
Perfect.
was like, oh, we're so glad you're here. And I was like, and
Oh,
we honestly, we talked about this at, like on the way back home. And it was kind of like, how people use sarcasm to deflect. And it was like, it would make sense that it would, in the mind, it's kind of like putting up a block. And that's why when you talk over it, it sounds like that. And I was like, that makes sense. But yeah, that was probably one of my favorite parts. It's
oh,
the sarcasm.
yeah, yeah. We can't always just control our candor, and how it's perceived. If we're not careful, because yeah, these sort of subconscious blocks can occur and cause things to become misinterpreted. So yeah, nothing's ever too straightforward, as much as we like to kind of reduce and codify a lot of these bits of wisdom as to how to approach interaction. But we use things like sarcasm as a sometimes very valuable defense mechanism in certain scenarios. It's just an extension of humor, basically. A lot of humor is rooted in some kind of irony or sarcasm. I guess the semantic distinction for sarcasm is kind of when it gets into more of a hurtful territory or aggressive. But it's. I think I was thinking about just the notion of like never projecting any kind of negative emotion or negative feelings to people around you, and that just I don't know. There's something that doesn't really sit right with that notion. I mean, for one thing, you want to be honest about how you feel, but you also don't want to be disrespectful. But you also don't. I don't know. Like people talk about, or I mentioned being Pollyannish, and like toxic positivity.
Yeah, I was like, toxic positivity was exactly what I was thinking of.
And that's sort of like the extreme, like lovey-dovey. Oh, I love this. You get that?
It's joy. It's like the embodiment of joy, how she
Yeah.
thought she was supposed to be in the beginning. Like when she got mad, I was like, oh yeah. I'm like, you better not go into her brain. There's emotions there. No, she's just joy. But obviously, joy can be complex. Sadness can be complex. That's what we learned in the first movie. So I
Yeah,
was like, yeah, like it's not always just like one shade. You can only be happy if you have joy, nothing else.
you can provide a balance, but yeah, it can be tempting to lean too heavily in one way or the other. And
Hmm.
it's not as easy, at least for me, like to be, completely positive all the time. Because I think that possibly just takes more energy than being negative.
Yes. I
Um,
feel like anger probably rolls my brain more. They're
yeah,
the one in the middle console generally. But
anger is energy intensive, but it also,
uh,
I don't know, it's more of an expenditure of energy than, I don't know, being positive requires a lot of like, I don't know, it, it, uh yeah, it's different from anger, but I guess you could eventually snap if you're forcing yourself to be positive, and then
oh well, and that's what happens. They're like, "Ah, oh, you're always like, oh, you're not being serious." Blah blah blah. And she turns around and she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Ha ha ha ha! Yes, yes." But yeah, when that's like honestly, it's usually I'm fine. It's like, "Oh yeah, we're having a good time, we're happy, yeah," and then I get overwhelmed, and then we're no longer happy. So, so I'm
emotion.
like, anger comes up very quickly for me.
There's always a flip side to every coin. When I think of toxic positivity, I just think of like some Disney bloggers. I think,
Oh yeah, I'd say mom
yeah, sometimes within that whole ecosystem,
TikToks. Oh,
yeah, I
are we
think,
there? Okay. It like froze for a second.
oh shoot, yeah,
No, it's okay. But yeah, like the mom TikTokers, which I mean moms, and I'm gonna say this like a blanket statement, not everybody, but like the mom community online is so toxic because it's the toxic positivity. You have to love being a mother. You chose this. Everything that ever happens, you have to be happy about. You can never have a bad day. You can never like dislike your kids a little bit because then you're a bad mom. And it's like, I'm like, y'all, it's like that's why people, when they become mothers, or like, I mean, anyone, someone becoming a parent, they're like, oh, am I bad at this? Am I just a bad parent? Do I just suck? And it's because everyone's so toxic and positive. And I'm like, yeah, you're allowed to have bad times. You are literally controlling humans who are different people from you. It's hard. And so it's like, yeah, it's so toxic. All the toxic positivity. And I'm like, come on, let's be realistic just a little bit for 5 seconds. That's why nothing on the internet is real, generally. A general
yeah,
consensus.
yeah. I mean, with some of these videos, they're meant to be consumed in a minute or less. Basically, you don't have a lot of time for nuance, so it can seem very like forced and disingenuous, just for no other reason than the format. But yeah, people really, also philosophically kind of tell themselves you have to, will things into existence, manifest. If you, yeah, if you think positive, then, good things will happen and so forth. But then that can result in, well, if you are too overzealous about your own, um, again, virtue, then you're going to be judgmental ultimately of people, and that leads to arrogance, and that's ultimately going to lead to conflict and strife and all sorts of issues within your personal life and interactions. So you're making a trade-off with how your perspective of only looking at um, things from a morally superior ground, reflects on how other people are able to engage with you, and if you're like that, then it becomes difficult because everyone just thinks you're being self-righteous and judgmental.
I mean, yeah, well, and it's funny. I was like thinking about the emotions and stuff, how you have like envy and anxiety and stuff. And they've actually done studies recently, which I feel like also kind of like coincides with like their ages, how they're teenagers, like they're teenish teenagers. And they're actually saying that they're recommending like kids their age to get access to stuff like social media, YouTube, TikTok, things like that later and later because you have stuff like envy and anxiety and consuming all this stuff and expecting your like life to be a certain way because you're watching these, influencers who make $1 million to do nothing except do stupid videos. It's like they're like, oh, I have to be like that. I have to do this. And so now, like, you have all these teenagers who expect to be influencers and they're just full of anxiety and envy. And I'm like, wow, I'm surprised they didn't include social media in this. But that's for the one they do in another 10 years when she's 18 or something.
Uh, I did not think of this when watching the movie, but really, it's like the thing of, oh, how do you set a horror movie in, modern day when you've got, smart devices, and what kind of screenwriting trick can we use to, get people's phones, get them separated from their phones or whatever, out in a place maybe where there is no signal, or where a cabin in the woods type of situation, would maybe be one suggestion. But in this film, it's the camp,
It's camp.
the coach who's leading the camp, just makes everyone turn in their phones on the first day, and that obviously, it works so well within the context of the plot that I didn't think of it as clearly what it is. I'm not saying that this is purely the reason for it, but it is a great screenwriting concession ultimately.
Yeah, they're like, we don't have to include any of that because we're just going to take away all their phones just for the weekend. And it's so funny too because they're so mad. They're like, gosh, Riley, look what you did. And honestly though, because like my daughter and her friends have phones. Granted, my daughter didn't have access to social media yet, but like some of her friends do, and they're all like, oh, we gotta buy this $70 drunk elephant retinol stuff for our face and Stanley cups. And I'm like, no, no, you guys are 11. No. So I do remember, I honestly kind of forgot that they even did this thing about the phones for a second. But it makes sense. I'm sure if I was like, oh, you can't have your phone for the weekend, she'd be like, what am I gonna do then? I'm gonna talk to my friends. I want to play Cookie Run Kingdom.
Uh, well, it is a strange new world where kids aren't separated from technology in the way that I guess it was more of a later development. We are kind of in that weird unicorn zone.
Yeah, the in-between zone.
Yeah.
We remember the before times and the after times.
I didn't have a data plan on my phone until I was in college. Even though,
Yeah. I
yeah,
don't think I did either.
yeah, smart devices had been around, smartphones had been around, since I was in high school. But I guess first iPhone, wasn't that like 2008 or something?
Yeah, I want to say the first touchscreen iPhone came out my senior year of high school, and I graduated 2009.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it came out because I remember my friend got one, and I was like, that's so cool. I had like I don't know, one of those little like Windows phones at the time.
It was a 2010 graduating class. I had a Motorola NV3, I believe it was called, or LG NV3. I think it was LG, which, could access the internet theoretically. I never used it for any internet purposes. It basically functioned as a dumb phone for me, but it had like a whole
Yeah.
keyboard and everything.
I
Kind of,
remember when I got texting, I didn't realize that you had to pay for texts at a time,
oh,
and I didn't really have anyone to text. And then when I got to high school, I had more people to text. And my mom found out real quickly that she had to put some texting stuff on her phone, or she was gonna have to pay a lot of money.
I was.
She was like, "You have to pay for that." I was like, "I'm sorry."
Oh yeah, it's evolved quite a bit since then, but
Yeah.
I was
Or
pretty
call
late.
me after 9. Call me after 9. I'll call you after 9. I'll call you back. Hang up.
Oh, I was pretty late to having a phone in general, so I think my first phone was unlimited texting, but definitely was a new concept at the time, I think.
No, I had one of those like original Nokia phones that like the game was like you could play Snake. It was only pixels. I think I got it I think I got it when I was in 8th grade, and it's because I did sports. And we didn't live very far from the school, so I would call my mom and be like, "Hey, can you come get me?" Or I'd be like, "Hey, I'm gonna walk with so and so back home." So I got one in middle school, late middle school, because I was in sports. But yeah, it didn't do anything cool. I could play Snake, and I could call people after 9. That was I mean, I could call them before then too, but that costs money. I didn't do that.
I never had to do numerical texting, which is
Oh, really? Oh, I was so good at that. I was, like, one of those speed texters. I could have been in the competitions.
no, I'm not great on manual dexterity in general, and I probably would have struggled with that and never really gotten past it. Um, well, yeah, there's a lot going on in this, and I guess we'll kind of just speed through some of the rest of it. But we haven't even talked that much about the other new emotions, embarrassment, ennui, envy. And I don't know, it almost seems like some of these, oh, there's even nostalgia who pops in a little bit.
Yes. I love that. They're like, "No, you're not supposed to come back until she's in college." And I was like,
The color thing is significant for me because I kind of wonder, like, to what degree are these new emotions kind of combinations of other emotions? And, your five core emotions are represented by bold primary colors, and then if you try to mix and match those, then you get. I mean, for one thing, you start to see the memories, the memory orbs take on multiple different emotions combined into one orb, and then these anthropomorphic emotion characters themselves, seem to reflect kind of a combination of multiple different of the main five core emotions. Like anxiety specifically seems like a merging of fear and anger with the purple and well, I mean, orange. You talk about color theory. It's
red
red.
and yellow.
So
Yeah.
anger and joy. I don't know, but fear itself is kind of like that's purple, so that'd be blue and red. So sadness and anger. Um, so both anxiety and fear would have that. If you're just basing it on color, they both have red. So anger at the root of each of them. I don't know. It's not an exact.
I was thinking about that earlier. I was like, I don't know, maybe they don't match up. Even though I like that fear is like, yeah, anxiety's where it's at. Like
Yeah,
she's wrong, but like I like her. But I'm like, I honestly though, fear and anxiety, like, hand in hand. Those two things can be very, very similar sometimes.
yeah. It's basically just a nuanced distinction between the two. Fear literally says, "I'm gonna," or you and I are gonna get along well together, or something like that. Um, yeah, and anxiety, I guess, it's just fear, but projected into the future, basically. I think it can also
Yeah.
be into the past or into some imagined space, but it revolves around kind of uh, I guess what do you call that? Distraction or uh, division from the present.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like embarrassment too. Like you can get embarrassed in the moment, but like if you think about it, like embarrassment is kind of also related to fear. It's like because you get like secondhand embarrassment or like embarrassment after something happens, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I did that. Oh, it was so embarrassing. I'm so stupid. There's like fear that you did something stupid. That was also kind of connected.
Yeah, dissociation was the word I was looking for, but
Yeah, dissociation. I'd
um,
be doing that all the time.
no, I mean, I I make affirmative efforts to try to be more present in my life. I have meditation apps that I use, but it's like I still am deliberately also consuming media like podcasts that are,
Same.
yeah, they're designed to
I need my
distract.
background noise.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing, right? We're recording a podcast meant to distract people. Uh,
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes you need a brain break. That's how I think about, because like when I was younger, of course, it was like, oh, if you're like dissociating, if you're like, oh, you're such a daydreamer, your head's in the clouds. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm just giving my brain a little break. Okay. We're just gonna maybe space out, maybe think about something. Who knows? Brain break. That's how I like to think of it now. That's my toxic positive way of thinking about
No,
it.
well, that I guess it's in some ways what meditation is, where you will ultimately rely on an anchor. You know, I don't know if all the theories would say that you absolutely need an anchor, but you know, in my experience, it's either some text or you know, some concept. If it's like a um, Lectio Divina style, you know, reading of scripture passage, you know, wisdom. That's one sort of meditation. But then also there's just Zen meditation, which is like the breath, or you're, you know, paying attention to your body, scanning through the body, things like that. So you're anchoring yourself to something and applying your focus to something. So with like a podcast or another activity, you know, you're basically just treating that as your anchor instead. And sometimes it can help you focus to where you can then accomplish other tasks more or less effectively. Like if you're vacuuming your house or washing dishes or something like that, or driving, you know, it doesn't really
Yeah.
distract from those kinds of things. Can
I do
maybe,
that when I'm like keying things, like with my job. It's like, oh, I gotta key payroll.
yeah.
It's like, so sometimes because it is kind of tedious. It's not like something that requires much brain power. So my brain's just like, we need some sound or we're gonna be off in space. And I'm like, all right. And so
It's
yeah, I'm like, I'm
yeah.
very much one of those like podcast videos playing in the background kind of gals. I'm like, I need something. But like my husband, he can't have any noise. Like, I mean, he can have some, but like he can't listen to like a podcast. He can listen to music, but he's like, yeah, I get too distracted. And I'm like, well, can't relate.
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all situation
Yeah.
with, you know, how to approach focus and distraction. I was just listening to a Star Wars podcast today and thinking about how, like, Anakin Skywalker, he became this legendary Jedi. He started late in life. You know, the Jedi didn't want to bring him in because he was, you know, too old, according to their rules, but they made an exception. And then he grew to be, you know, one of the most powerful and demonstrating his prowess, you know, during the Clone Wars. And he was even assigned a Padawan, which was, you know, an extreme honor at, you know, the relative young age he was when he was given the Padawan. And, you know, it's just like, well, how did he become so great? I guess he had high metachlorians, which is one explanation, but also like
I think he just did.
he, well, yeah, in what ways did he show increased determination and focus and, you know, work ethic? You know, in what way was he doing, pulling a Riley and getting up before the rest of the camp and getting out on the ice doing drills, you know, all by herself, because through the power of anxiety. But
Yeah, envy, anxiety. She was like, I have to.
maybe
This has to
Anakin,
happen.
his precise focus was filtered through his libido, his it was his obsession with Padme, his eventual wife and childhood crush, and that maybe was like his avatar, you know, his focus kind of thing. Yeah.
That's what he needed. That he was like, yes, that's what we're going for. Well, it's like one of the parts which my daughter did not understand. When she goes to when she went in the bathroom, so it was like after she looks in the book, which was really cringe for to my daughter. My daughter, when she was like, I'm looking in the book to see if my name's in it. My daughter was like, no, don't do it. She had a blanket with her and was like trying to throw it over her. And I was like, no, you need to see what's happening. um, but she goes in the bathroom and I saw the Kool-Aid packet and I was like, oh, no, 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 don't do it. And my daughter was like, what's happening? So when I was in middle school, so I have brown hair. So I could never do it anyway. I couldn't put Kool-Aid packets in my hair. It doesn't show up. But I had friends who Kool-Aid packeted their hair. And I was like, no, it never comes out. it says that it's supposed to come out with like a couple washes. It doesn't. At least not if you're like a true blonde. Because my friend had like blue hair for the rest of the summer. But I was like, don't do it. Oh, it's so... I was like, that was like the cringiest part for me. The whole movie was like, that little bit of envy that was like, we need it. We needs it. I
Rent.
was like, I didn't like that part.
Yeah, that's not easy to get that kind of bold coloring in your hair, and red usually turns to pink if you're doing like
Yep.
strong bright red. So yeah, they
No, the only way to keep that going is to like one, you need like red dye, and then you have to continue to dye it red. Like
mm,
I had red hair for a brief moment in time, like true red, but it's so hard to keep up, especially when your hair is dark, because it was like my roots would be black within 3 weeks, and I was like, this is horrible. So I don't do red very often. I do like it, but yeah, I was like, no, don't do it. It's so cringe. You're not even a part of the team. Ugh.
your
And I
daughter,
know it's
your daughter responded to the spying on the notebook scenario, the coach
yes,
notebook.
because
Yeah.
yeah, like she would like, and it's so funny because like she does little like sneaky things, and I'm like, while it is frustrating because I'm like, don't do that, it's bad. But I'm like, I get that it's like a developmental thing. You have to learn sometimes what you should and shouldn't be doing. I get that, even though as a parent, it's very frustrating because of course I don't want my kid to get in trouble. But I think that the thought of like that she was going to do something bad and like second guessed it, and that if she did get caught, she would be in so much trouble. My daughter was like, when she was like, no, I'm looking, my daughter was like, no, don't look. What have you done? So yeah, she was like trying to cover her head. And I was like, no, you need to watch this part. Don't ever do some dumb stuff like this. Watch it. Feel it. Feel the cringe.
And I
So
like
yeah.
how, yeah, it was just kind of underwhelming. Ultimately, it was just three words. The coach clearly just didn't think much.
Yeah, she just didn't get caught. And I was like, ah, you should have gotten caught. But then I guess it would be like a whole nother slew of things if she got in like a bunch of trouble. So I
Yeah.
guess it was just one of those things that like she eventually learned like, hey, you just got to roll with the punches. You're not going to get everything right the first time.
Well, and you can see Riley's clearly struggling, and so you don't really expect her to succeed in this whole hockey endeavor as much as some of these emotions convey that she would like to. And that's what anxiety does. It causes us to obsess over things, but ultimately proves counterproductive if, well, just with the way it is so exhausting and taxing, I think, on the body. Ultimately, you just get that with the way that this anxiety character is constantly downing shots of espresso and just going on the
Yes.
console. Yeah.
Well, and I even read that apparently Maya Hawke um modified her breathing during yeah, she like modified her breathing during the times that anxiety was like a bit more heightened and panicked, especially when it got to the panic attack part. She was like, yeah, I wanted to convey like she's not breathing anymore. Like she is like struggling through it. Which, and I'm like, honestly though, for anyone who's ever had like an anxiety attack, that makes perfect sense. Like you feel like it's like it gets real tight. The air gets real tight and you feel very like tense. And I'm like, so I was like, it made total sense that she would do something like that. And apparently also as it got closer to that peak, they made the colors and stuff in the film more saturated, more contrasted. So everything's a little bit more like, I don't know, staticky almost. Kind of like how her sense of self becomes like that weird crackly flower thing. Um, which I thought was an interesting like embodiment of like how Riley feels about herself as she's like, because of course like Joy, she didn't learn the first time. She's like, oh, I like myself, I'm a good person, and she's like, see, that's what she is. I'm gonna go do this whole thing where I focus on the wrong thing the whole time. uh and so then anxiety was like, ah, it has to be orange for it to be perfect, and she's like, I hate myself, and she was like, crap, I did it wrong. I also did it wrong. And then of course, they all end that like you feel they eventually realize that they need everything to feel good
Yeah, yeah. This
or
just
normal, well-rounded, I guess.
yeah, the balance just isn't there, and everything's all kind of fragmented and jagged. That little, it's like a upside down Elsa chandelier kind of thing that
Yeah.
the back of it forms Riley's core identity. And yeah, originally it's healthy, but then once puberty hits, everything kind of starts to get shaken loose. And I
Haywire.
that was the emotionally affecting moment for me ultimately when Joy she embraces the that little it looks like a trophy or what we call it, the little bouquet of core
Yeah.
identity, and then it ultimately shifts to not be so dysfunctional, and now instead of just one thing, it kind of fluctuates between a variety of different beliefs, I guess
Well, it's
that.
because she kept, and I mean, of course, it's obviously like the learning moment for Joy is that they were throwing away those memories, those bad memories.
Oh, right.
Even though I was like, did you not learn anything the first time?
Yeah.
But it was like they were throwing away all these bad memories, and she gets there and she's like, oh, like looking back at them, she's like, oh, like you need these. You have to learn from your memories and your mistakes. So when they flood it with all of those memories, it like forms her true self once they get rid of the jagged one, I guess.
Yeah, this
And
is.
that's why it kind of like goes in between all the different feelings.
Yeah, the strings that form the chandelier like spring up from deep within the subconscious that pool down, way beneath the surface. It's like, I don't know, in Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf is fighting the Balrog, they fall deep into the depths of the mountain and all the way down to this underground lake. I guess Gollum lived in a similar environment in The Hobbit too, just this deep.
Yeah, so I I read that when Envy would do like her little like ooh, if she's like being envious of something, that they wanted her to be kind of like Gollum-esque.
That's cool.
They were like, yeah, we kind of wanted her to be like, ooh, I want that. I need that. Which I mean, obviously, her voice actor was perfect for her.
Um,
Like
Io
she did,
Debris.
yeah, like
But
she
she,
did so well. I never say her name because I know I'm gonna butcher it, but I'm like, yes, like because I've seen her in other stuff, and I always find her very amusing. But I was like, she was great for that. She
yeah,
was good
the
for that one.
latest season of The Bear just dropped, and she was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles recently. So she's in everything now. Frankly, it's kind of
Yeah,
funny how much she's done. But I mean, The Bear is one of those almost water cooler level shows nowadays, which is hard to do with all the stuff, all the content that we have. But it seems to be one of those shows that has garnered quite the significant audience, including myself. I've started this latest season, but I've only gotten to the first episode.
I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah. Well,
I know
that
I only ever hear of House of the Dragon, which I also have never watched, but that's all I hear about. Oh, it's the cooking show.
what
Okay, I have heard of this. I haven't watched it though.
yeah, the bear, like these shows, The Bear, House of the Dragon, like they deal with very heavy emotional and philosophical issues, and like I think part of that is just them being such adrenaline fueled narratives, and that will ultimately just captivate a lot of people, and form sort of a compulsory relationship between the media and the viewer, which is kind of what you need to stand out in today's
Yeah.
overcrowded media landscape. And this has or reflects a similar dynamic with anxiety being such a central concept to this film. It does kind of provoke the neurons, those the endorphin chemicals, like what's the big one? uh,
Adrenaline?
adrenaline.
Yeah. So is it adrenaline?
That's what I
It's your
was.
fight or flight.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about why anxiety can be so destructive. Is she was just unleashing a flood of adrenaline, on Riley. So that's going to ultimately tank her prospects as a hockey player if she's only deriving her talent from these bursts,
Oh yeah.
bursts of adrenaline, because that's unsustainable.
Especially like when she didn't sleep at all too, and she was just going on like pure unfettered adrenaline. I was like, that's not gonna be good. And that's when she had the panic attack. I was like, that makes sense. That all links up.
Yeah. So very, very fun and kind of insightful. And, a lot of us are familiar with the way these things work, having lived them, but useful for kids and audiences who just, take a lot of their feelings for granted. And in many
They're like
ways,
baby stepping into it too. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm like, you haven't gotten into middle school yet. Like, I'm like, it's so funny at the beginning when she's like, I stink and I'm gross and I need to wash my hair. Gotten like I've told my daughter, I'm like, you're about to be in 6th grade. You have to make sure you wear deodorant. You have to make sure that you've washed your hair at least like every other day. I'm like, because if you are stinky or dirty, that will haunt you. From personal, I'm not even from personal experience, but from being a middle schooler at one time, I'm like, people don't forget and kids are mean. So I'm like, please, if you don't take anything else from me, just put on deodorant and wash your hair. That's all I ask. Brush your teeth too. That's all I ask. And she's like, it's gonna be fine. No one's gonna say anything. And I'm like, yeah, until someone says you're stinky. You come home to me crying because someone said you're stinky.
Yeah. Well,
They
yeah,
don't understand.
there is an element of adjustment and training to be, more socially accepted, and that's an inevitability. Unfortunately, it does take work to be a functional human, but you can become overly obsessed with that too,
Yeah.
and that becomes so. Like, how do you find a balance of going with the flow? Well, I guess it just means listening to the senses and basically just trusting, trusting yourself. The that was kind of, I think, maybe the crux of that whole core identity concept, being able to have a, well, the whole driving message of that destructive core belief was, I'm not enough, and so that's going to prevent you from ultimately just trusting that, you can make the right decision in the moment, and not have to be so, you know worried, anxious about every situation that you go into. um,
I
we
think you could also say it's like friendship.
Mhm.
But that's another thing. She wasn't leaning on her friends because she was like, oh, I'm gonna have to have new friends because all my friends are leaving. And it's
Right.
like in the end, you could have just leaned on your friends and made new friends and it'd been fine. Like you still have your friends just because you guys aren't with each other all the time. And I mean, honestly, Joy, she's never been very good on leaning on other people either. So, or anxiety. Anxiety was like, I can do all this by myself. I don't need help. Goodbye.
Yeah, dishonesty there. Yeah, no, it all comes down to kinda, yeah, that honesty and love, friendship shared amongst your peers. But yeah, I mean, it was a dilemma, truly, with the friendship situation because of the friends, moving to a different school. That can ultimately be very difficult for kids to go through. So, I mean, that temptation was warranted. It was justified for Riley to kind of need to find the new friend group. But she went about it in the wrong way by kind of
Mhm.
icing out
Yeah. So it's like, I don't need you anymore. We're not gonna be friends.
friends. Yeah. So, yeah, it's gosh, it is a complicated world for youth, and I
Mm-hmm.
definitely struggled. And I think everyone just has their own different struggles. Yeah, this is no exact science, and ultimately, like, obsessing over all these intricate details of psychology, isn't helpful either. So it's just good to, I guess, take it in, and then, it's a bit of a cliche now, but let it go.
Exactly. Take one from Elsa and let it go.
Yeah. But yeah, don't, you know go out of your way to avoid learning about these things either, because it's interesting and it's valuable, I think. So you would
Yeah, it's
recommend
good for
it?
your brain.
Yeah, you would recommend
Oh,
it out to, yeah.
yeah, I think so. I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend it for younger kids. I will say I think that obviously a lot of the theme kind of just like obviously it's just a funny fun movie and it's animated. So my son was like fine with it. But I don't think it was like his favorite. But my 11-year-old loved it. And all of her friends have loved it. Um, like all of her friends on the soccer team, they were talking about it because it was so funny. I was like, oh yeah, it wasn't like a boohoo moment, but like when she's in like, you know, the like mix of the panic attack, it was just like a tear. And my daughter was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just feel it, man. Just right there. Um, and
Yeah.
of course her friends are like, why would you cry? And I'm like, you guys don't understand yet. You guys have baby anxiety. One day you will have bigger anxiety. You guys are just getting to sixth grade. You don't quite understand. You'll know. It's coming. Don't worry. Um, so yeah, I was like very touched at that moment. It was like such a good embodiment of what it feels like to be in the throes of anxiety and to like, and sometimes you just need someone to kind of pull you out of it because you're just being irrational, you know? And sometimes your brain's just like, no, we're being right. We're just crazy and right. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I
Yeah.
would say for kids, maybe 8 and older. The younger kids, they might like it, but they're not really gonna get it, I don't think. I don't
Yeah.
think it's gonna hit the same way.
If there's anything, I don't know. I felt kind of anxious at various points, just kind of dealing with some of the emotional.
Yes.
But
There were some times
involved
I
in
felt anxious too. I was like, no, no. I'm telling you, when she pulled out that Kool-Aid packet, I knew exactly what she was about to do. I was like, no, 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 no. It was that secondhand embarrassment. I was like, cringing. I was like, I don't love that. Or like when she was like being rude to her friends, I was like, no, don't do that. Because I mean, I'm sure that we all like probably at some point in our teenage years, we're not very nice to our friends at some point or another, whether it was intentional or not, because everyone's just trying to fit in. And so I'm like, especially girls, man. And I don't know what your experience was in middle school, but like girls in middle school, they're freaking mean. And that's why I like my mom tried to prepare me. And of course, I was like, you're so dumb. Like me and my friends will be best friends forever. And then my friends became little jerks. And so like I like try to do the same thing for mine. I'm like, some of your friends, they might change. You might change. You guys might feel some kind of way, but then you guys will get over it once everyone chills out, and then you guys will be cool. Maybe.
I
And
mean,
she's like, we're fine, mom. You're being crazy. And I'm like, okay. The cycle continues.
yeah, had a pretty stable upbringing, and had a lot of just virtues drilled into me. So I just I never wanted to be a bully or any kind of you know detriment to my peers or anything. But I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of ways in which I behaved in ways that were off-putting to plenty of people, and I just didn't realize it. It's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
Teenagers generally, it comes out in like interactions online too. Like you're less filtered when you're able to kind of hide behind the screen a little bit.
Well, it's
Um,
easy to like disconnect yourself from empathy. And like they've done studies and like they say a lot of like kids and teenagers really don't like a true sense of like empathy, what it is to be empathetic for another person until they're like 13, 14. So I'm like, yeah, like if you say like I mean there's been times that my daughter or her friends like say something and I'm like, you really gotta think about how you talk. Like, how's that gonna affect like how would that make you feel if someone said that to you? And they're like, I'm fine. I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm just like, so I try to, I'm like, okay, your brain's not fully formed. It's fine.
yeah, I mean,
You
yeah.
just gotta keep trying to like get them there.
It was funny how like the personality islands were, all the
Yes.
usual thing, but then there was technically a family island, but it's
It
so
was so
tiny.
small.
It's like a
But I did like it had changed though. It kind of, and I think like, and maybe they didn't do this intentionally. This is what I took from it, is that it kind of looked like rock, like
yeah.
a small rock. And I was like, well, I think what it is that by that age, you know that your family's there for you,
Mhm.
but it's not as important. And maybe that's why it's not as important because you know your parents are there for you. Like you know your family's there. And so you're like, okay, well, I know they're going to be there for me. So I'm just going to push that down because I know it's there. I can come back to it. And like friends and having fun, all the things I like doing, those are most important right now. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, I wonder if they made it look like that intentionally or if I'm just reading into it.
No, it,
Mm,
it it looked like almost like a religious statue or symbol, like, how you'd see a statue of the Ten Commandments or a creche, like the manger scene, with the, Mary, Joseph, Jesus
Yeah,
display. And yeah, that type of thing for kids is just not really,
not important.
yeah,
Not in the same way.
not
It kind of, have
solidified.
you, it's like, I think that they're carved out of wood and they're sold in like Pier 1, one of those expensive places. But I think I've literally seen like figures that look like that, where it's like a taller dad, a mom, and like the kid, and they're like kind of faceless, but you know that they're like a little family that like it tends to be older white ladies collect, and they have a whole bunch of them. That's what it reminded me of, because I think they like whittle them out of wood or something, but they're kind of expensive. That's what it reminds me of. I'm pretty sure it looked exactly like that.
Yeah, it's sort of a token, kind of
Yeah,
obligatory,
little
and
decor pieces.
ultimately it must have some significance if it does exist within the personality island space. So, yeah, we don't really realize how attached we are to our families until, tragedy occurs sometimes, or there gets to be like, um, you know, maybe a misfortune befalls, a family member with whom you're not necessarily, um, the closest to, but then, you all of a sudden feel yourself just, instinctively reacting in a certain way, just because you have that familial connection. So yeah,
I mean, yeah, I feel that. I mean, we stayed in Georgia because my family's here.
uh,
And it's like, it's nice to have, especially when you have kids and stuff. It's like you want them to grow up around like their grandparents and know them and blah, blah, blah. And like, because my husband, like his family, they live in Virginia, but they're from England. And like him, he has 5 siblings and they're all over the place. And so he's like, yeah, we never really like all lived around each other, especially him being the youngest. So a lot of them didn't even live in the house anymore. And so he's like, yeah, it's been really weird to like live somewhere where I have family and like people like have birthday dinners for me. I know that every time I have a birthday, someone's going to have a dinner for me. And he's like, yeah, it's really nice. He was like, it's not something I've experienced before. And I'm like, see, I'm like, family's good. And so that, and honestly, that's probably why parents are like, you have to try and instill that in your kids. Cause it's like, yeah, family can be good. Now, is family always good? Not always. But for the most part, if they're decent, it's good to have like some kind of familial bond.
oh yeah, yeah. You need to have ties to your, humans aren't made for solitary existence. There are people who try, but it tends not to go all that well if you're, overly isolated from other people. But I guess everyone's a little bit different, and this is just, one way. This film, one way of representing what's going on inside our minds, and it's just a fun topic to explore ultimately. But by no means, have we found all the answers. Endless nuance to be had, I guess, when it comes to exploring and discussing and parsing all these things. Um, yeah, I don't know. I basically just wanted to touch on just the family thing, the adrenaline, and how to be more balanced in your approach. And I guess in this world of extreme stimulation, sometimes the mind becomes overemphasized. So I think I don't know if this film identifies ways in which to kind of draw ourselves away from our heads and be more in our bodies. But I guess ultimately that takes the form of the fact that Riley is at this intensive hockey camp, and so she is getting a lot of good physical exercise and exertion, which is a very positive way to deal with a lot of these things. Ultimately, I mean, that's probably the most healthy and effective way to deal with some of these mental issues, is to have a physical outlet, through which you're able to expend all this excess kind of youthful energy. So
Yeah,
yes,
I say
sedentary.
sports are needed.
Yeah, yeah, it's too easy to be sedentary in today's age, and that's one way in which we definitely need to take a proactive effort to combat some of these psychological issues that become more and more prevalent. the more it becomes possible to just be able to sit around and not do much. I mean, we all need to get outside ultimately is the thing.
Yeah, so touching grass is the best case scenario. But I mean, that's so true because like I mean, my daughter also has ADHD like I do. We're both diagnosed. And it's like so she plays soccer. She loves soccer. But outside of soccer season, homegirl does not want to go outside. Neither of my kids really want to go outside, which I feel them because it's hot and disgusting. But I'm like today we went swimming. I was like, come on, get off your butts, wake up. And I'm like, I know it's summertime. I know you stayed up all night talking to your friends. That's fine, but get up. We're going outside. Like, I'm like, I need y'all's energy to come out somewhere or y'all are gonna tear down my house. So and like they fight a lot when they like are not very active, but they do that. They're like, I just want to watch Netflix. Can I just watch YouTube? Can I just play a game? And I'm like, you need some vitamin D. Go outside. Let's go outside. Because it's not like when we were kids. Like when I was a kid, my mom would be like, yeah, go play outside. And I'd go play outside for hours. But now they're like, all right, we've been out here for 20 minutes. Can we go inside? I'm bored. And I'm like,
Yeah,
no, no, go do something. Kick a ball. Ride a bike. Leave me alone.
yeah, got to prescribe that um, that muscle building time. That yeah, prescribe that caloric expenditure.
Yeah, drain all the adrenaline out of your body, please. And it's so hard too, because like, half the time I'm like, I have so much to do. I need to clean. I need to do this. The last thing I want to do is go sit outside and sweat for 2 hours. But I do it for my kids.
Feel
I'll
great.
do it for them, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. Any final thoughts on Inside Out 2?
Oh, I was gonna say, I thought they did a good job of replacing Disgust and Fear's voice actors. Granted, I didn't listen to them like side by side. I did notice like Disgust sounded a little different, but I was curious because I was like, I thought Mindy Kaling was obviously like perfect for Disgust. And apparently they only offered them $100,000 each to reprise their roles in the second movie, which I found interesting since the first one did well. I was like, why would they? I'd be curious to know what Amy Poehler was paid for this movie.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not a big. These are just voices, and a lot of times the casting of celebrities is just kind of for the novelty of it. It doesn't make sense
Yeah.
to pay them millions of dollars to do these roles just to have the name brand association.
Well,
Um,
they didn't used to. Like Disney movies back in the day did not have huge, big actors and actresses behind them 90% of the time.
but yeah, I mean, ever since like Shrek, and you had like the names and the
Yeah,
credits
Mike Myers.
driven by these personalities. And it was put to good use in that instance. But since then it's just become commonplace for these big budget animated films to kind of flush away a bunch of money on voice talent just to help with the promotion of the film. Ultimately, it's kind of like a marketing expense in that way. But really, it's just you can get similar amount of performance from a much, you know, I guess more affordable way of casting actors who are professional voice actors, or just as, I guess, capable of acting in these roles, and not have to deal with, like, yeah, paying the huge fees associated with some of those big A-list celebrities.
Yeah. When I guess like, back in 2015, like they were bigger, but now they are bigger and older than they were back then, I guess almost 10 years ago. So I'm like, I guess it makes sense because like, I mean, Maya Hawke and that like most of them, they're like pretty noticeable, but they're not like old and they're not like super duper big. They haven't been around for, 10, 15, 20 years yet. So I'm like, I guess they're newer. So I'm like, I guess it makes sense. But Phyllis Smith did come out of retirement to do Sadness, and I love that because I love her. I was an office girly. And she's honestly the perfect embodiment of sadness. Sadness reminds me a lot of my Nana. My Nana is Phyllis. And so I'm always like, oh, there's my Nana and Phyllis. I love them. So I was very pleased with the voice actors for this movie.
Yeah, it's good. I didn't necessarily miss Mindy Kaling or Bill Hader. I mean, I love Bill Hader. He's great. But they got Tony Hale to play Fear, and he's kind of he's a celebrity in his own right, obviously. And then Liza Lapiro plays Disgust. I'm not sure.
I've
I'm
never
not
heard of
familiar with
her,
her.
but apparently she's on The Equalizer.
Yeah, the TV show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's just fun to be back with these characters ultimately, and a lot of exceptional, um, you know, significantly like popping talent, I guess, big names from kind of the up and coming generation who appear in this movie now with Maya Hawke and Iowa Debris, and I guess Paul Walter Hauser was the voice of Embarrassment. He doesn't really speak, right? But
He does a little bit. I think he has like one line at the end, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, he talks."
it's just funny because he's appearing in this little promo video I'm seeing on IMDb, uh, doing like an interview. So he, I guess, participated in some of the press junkets and everything, even though he just mostly grunts in this movie.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, I mean, you can make money in that. If anyone's watched Demon Slayer, that's all Nezuko does for the first like 2 or 3 seasons. So she
Well,
barely talks.
what did you think of Lance slash the Cloud Strife?
I thought that was so funny. So I was gonna say something about that before we were done. Him and the secret, the deep dark secret was so funny. Like, and I love like the old video game, and it's like, ah, yes, his special move is just him rolling and doing nothing. Uh, but it's so funny too, because like, I mean, obviously, I like anime, I like video games. There are some characters that I look back now that I'm like, oh no, that's weird. That's weird and strange. Like, I mean, I was an Inuyasha girl,
Yeah.
still kind of am.
Well,
But I was like, oh man, I was in a dog demon boy. Oh, I don't know. It was a weird time in my life. I was a
no,
teenager. It doesn't make sense. But it made sense. I was like, it's so funny to me.
and these are sort of niche genres or media in some ways where like yeah, people like you and other fans form these deep attachments to anime characters or video game characters who don't have necessarily the most fleshed out personalities or identities in and of themselves, but they become like a great subject for projection, I guess. They become
Well, that and it's like
uh,
you're kind of like at that time too, you're kind of like, experiencing new things, like finding out what you like and what you don't like. And you're like, I don't know. I think that guy being a stubborn, kind of funny dude is kind of hot, I guess. I don't know. I want him and the protagonist to end up together. I don't know. It's weird. But it's so funny though, because like when we were growing up, anime was not cool. I did not tell my friends that I watched Inuyasha. But now it's cool. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, we love Sesshomer. We love Inuyasha." And I'm like, "Why didn't any of you heifers tell me this when we were in high school?" Because I was also watching that at night. Okay. So yeah, it was like so funny. And then I love that the deep dark secret was like something so little and like not even that important. But obviously, when it happened, it seemed like a big thing. And she was like, "Ah, I thought it was gonna be that you peed in the pool." And they were like, "No, no," closes it back. I was like, "Yeah, that was," because I thought they were going to leave us on a cliffhanger. I was going to be mad about that.
yeah, I don't know if it, and those kinds of things that sort of trigger the anti-woke brigade of like, oh, she's going to be secretly, LGBT or something. But no, it's like we all have those things that, we'd be too ashamed or embarrassed to outwardly admit to people who are close to us. And so like, yeah, it doesn't, there's nothing overly serious about having this deep, dark secret locked away. I think that's just natural. Um,
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of things I didn't tell my parents until I was like an adult. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that thing that got broken? That was me. That was stupid. But and that I did see that too, that a couple of people who were like, oh, I thought she was gonna be gay or oh this, that, and this. And I was like, well, you can admire people of the same gender as you and not necessarily it has to be romantic. And I think that's like everyone's just, I don't know, kind of hypersensitive about that now. And I'm like, no, there's plenty of people that I admire, but I don't want to romantically be with them.
why do you have to like put it into such a
Yeah, it doesn't
concrete
have to be
box?
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like she thought she was really cool. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I think Rihanna's really cool, but I don't want to date her.
Um,
So yeah, I think it's like people want to like I guess make everything something, and I'm like, you really don't have to. It's not that serious.
and this newer generation, I mean, there's a lot more openness to sexual identities and things like that. Well,
That too.
but it's not like, kids are more interested in the actual like activity of these things. It's kids have, kind of, I mentioned libido earlier. I mean, that's kind of on the vast decline, I feel like, in our
I think so.
coming generation.
Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's just like I think maybe like I don't know, like jumping into relationships I don't isn't quite as forced anymore. Because like when I was growing up, it was just like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Oh my gosh, oh, she's gonna have boyfriends. Oh, boyfriend, boyfriend. And like I've just never talked like that to my kids. I've never been like, oh, you're gonna be a lady killer. I'm gonna have to beat boys off of you with bats. I've just never talked to my kids like that. And like, I mean, Scarlett's turning 11 and she just isn't interested in dating. She's no interest. She doesn't like she was like in fourth grade, she had friends who were like, "Oh my gosh, my boyfriend this, my boyfriend that." Everyone's fighting, and she was just like, "I'm just not interested in that." I'm like, "Okay, well, I mean, you got your whole life to be interested in that if you want to be. I like, do you, girl? You got soccer and school and stuff. If you don't care about that, I don't care about that. I
Well,
don't care."
I think there are signs that um, kids and youth are more interested in showing each other like healthy amounts of affection, being,
Mhm.
overtly affectionate in certain ways that, we might have been uncomfortable with in earlier eras because, might seem homoerotic or whatever. But like, yeah, nowadays, it's more in vogue for guys to compliment each other and talk about fashion and appearance. And and girls have always, I think, had an easier time with,
I
uh,
think so.
yeah, affection and thing. That's just
Mhm.
how.
Yeah, like I could hug my friends and no one was like, "Oh, gay." That was like never something that happened to me, but I had plenty of guy friends that I saw do it to each other. And so, and that's something like, so Oliver, my 5-year-old, is very affectionate and he will try to be affectionate with kids that we don't know at the park and stuff. And I'm like, I love that you to everyone, but you have to at least ask. You cannot go up to other kids that you don't know and just hug them. And so I'm like, I'm trying to prepare him for kindergarten because he's going in August. And I'm like, you can't just hug everyone. You have to ask. You have to ask consent. Ask them, ask them, ask them. And but I'm like, but I do want to instill like, yes, you can show affection to people who are also boys. That's totally fine. But please ask first. Same with girls. Ask them first. But yeah, I do think that it's like a more, I guess, a healthy approach to human connection that we didn't always have in the past.
It's still fine to have this spectrum of where we characterize certain attributes as being more masculine or more feminine too. I mean, that's totally, I mean, that shouldn't go away. We shouldn't discourage, maybe, associating more strength focused and outwardly physical kind of attributes with maleness or masculinity, because that does have a strong association with the biology of, being male and having testosterone and things like that, and conversely with things that are typically associated as being feminine. But it's just a matter of not being so rigid in how we categorize these things, which
Yeah,
makes
like boys can't cry and blah
yeah,
blah blah.
more of a
Which
healthy.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, my kid be crying all the time, so he's good. It's
uh,
usually because of sister though. I'm like you're a little aggressive, aren't you?
it's
She's
healthy.
like, is she's
Yeah.
well, she's like so nice to all like other kids that we don't even know, little babies and everything. But him, it's different when they're siblings. I don't know. You're like, I can beat the crap out of you. That's allowed.
So, yeah, it's good to have, ways of understanding. Okay, that this is sort of, it's good to have attributes that are reflective of both male and female. But you represent one more than the other, and that's great too. It's just we all kind of, uh, you know, we fall within such nuanced and unique roles as individuals because we are ultimately unique. But it's also important to have broader categories into which we can place ourselves. And ultimately, that is going to manifest in certain extremely broad binary categories like genders themselves, or old versus young, or foreign versus local, or that just in group, out group types of things too. And I think the more broad we get, kind of the more significant problems can be, when they arise, when related to these kinds of just broad-based categories, because it just becomes too easy to discriminate according to those boundaries. So yeah, the more we can get people to see like the finer details of these situations, the more we tend to see the humanity in others. So I
Yeah.
guess
And
that
you don't always have to be in a bucket. You can get along people who aren't in your bucket.
yeah, it's healthy to be able to express, not be bottled. Let the inside out. All right. Well, that does it for the Thodcast, conversations about animation on our review of Inside Out 2. Thank you so much, Bridget, for joining me. I'm Philip, host of the Thodcast, thodcast.com, streaming on all kinds of podcast platforms and such. You can find the show at Thodcast if you want to contact on social media platforms. Yeah, and we'll be back with some more reviews and discussions on movies, most likely, some of the blockbusters that are going to be out. I don't know, Bridget, anything else? Where can folks find you online?
You can find me on Instagram. It's Bridget5246. That's Bridge with a T, 5246.
Very cool. Well, yeah, the whole anime thing, it's a very visual component. I was going to say, like, a lot of this stuff just comes down to style, and that can be a powerful thing. So animation excels in that regard, and this was definitely a fun time just getting to see the artistry of Pixar on full display. Some of their more recent stuff has maybe felt, I don't know, not like it lacked some of the spark of their sort of run of just pure form, back in kind of maybe their peak of a decade ago, just constantly getting those Oscar wins and those emotional, kind of shared cultural moments of like Up and Wall-E and Finding Nemo, Incredibles. I mean, but Pixar is Pixar. They've got an ethos. They'll continue to put out some pretty strong films. I'm sure as long as they're around. So this is a fun one from them. We've all been interested in catching up with the world of Inside Out, and now we finally were able to do so. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bridget, and for everyone listening for the Thodcast, conversations about animation. You all have a magical day. Have a wonderful week. Warm hugs.
Or cool hugs. It's hot.
Yeah, stay cool.